Hello folks, welcome to your least favorite EV channel. Today we have for you on our left the Lexus IS300 and GS300 transmission and inverter for your consideration. We will be doing a little bit of a, not quite a deep dive, but an in-depth into this system, comparing it to our more familiar Lexus GS450h system here. Then, in the next semi-exciting episode, we will be showing you how to wire up both the, let's call it the GS300 inverter and the IS300 or the GS450 inverter to our Zombieverter VCU system. And we're also going to be doing some off-camera, thankfully, some software bug fixing for the GS450 system and porting our code over to the GS300. So do stay with us, or maybe not. No, in fact, don't. Go watch a funny cat video. This stuff's boring. Okay, folks, so we're going to be talking to you today about the Lexus GS300 gearbox. I think it's probably better to call this a transmission than a gearbox because there's no actual gears to get changed in here. Inverter and other little bits of ancillary equipment that we need to make this guy work. Before we get into, I guess, the detail on that, I should note that there's been a lot of very good work done on this unit by several people on the Open Inverter forum, and I'll put a link in the video description to that thread. There's been a full teardown and working out of a lot of the very nice details of this unit. So I'll put a link in the description to that, and also there'll be a link in there for the wiki article over on the Open Inverter forum. So why are we interested in this particular unit? Isn't it just a gearbox? You know, don't we have to put a motor on this? And the answer is no. Like its larger cousin over there, the GS450 unit, this has two electric motors built in, which we will refer to as MG2 and MG1. MG2 is in the rear of the casing and MG1 is in the front. Now, for those of you interested in some more detail on this, because I'm not going to do a full deep dive, as I say, I will put a link in the description to a video where I did a full real walkthrough of the GS450. And I'll also link in the description, there's a very good YouTube channel there. There's a guy that's putting one of these in an old American truck, and he's been doing a lot of very good in-depth videos on the subject of that gearbox. So the appeal of these units in general is that they take up about the same space as a standard automatic gearbox that we would normally have bolted up to an internal combustion engine. So they will fit into the, I guess, the transmission tunnel of a traditional rear wheel drive vehicle. They have a prop shaft flange here that connects to a prop shaft, it goes back to a differential and drives the rear wheels as God intended things. So the appeal of these from an EV conversion point of view is that they contain everything that we need, and we can package this into the transmission tunnel, leaving the former engine bay free for all manner of goodies such as batteries, chargers, junction boxes and all of that type of thing. Now, some of you will be aware that I had previously done a build of a BMW E65 7 Series using the GS450 system, and there have been quite a few people have use this in rear wheel drive applications. I'll try and any links I can find to stuff, I will put them in the video description for you, because there's immediately two things that people tend to focus on when they're new to this and are new to the idea of using what is on paper at least a hybrid components from a non-plug-in hybrid vehicle for a full EV conversion. And the first is that these Toyota systems are a little bit, well, they were at the time unique anyway, in that they have a boost converter in there that can be used to boost their reasonably low battery voltages, around 200 to 300 volts, up to as high as sometimes 650 volts for running their motors. Now, as has been demonstrated repeatedly by folks who have done conversions with the GS450 system, there is no need to run voltages anywhere near that. These GS450 systems will run perfectly happily the normal 360 to 400 volt packs that we see in our conversion projects. I have little doubt that the GS300 system here will be any different. The second thing that people sometimes trip themselves up on is they tend to believe that, oh well, these are only hybrid motors and as such they won't be able to propel a vehicle over long distances without overheating. For the GS450 certainly that is patently untrue. One gentleman on the Open Inverter forum did a conversion with one of these, put I believe a full Tesla Model S pack into his car and completed over a 1,000 mile road trip without any overheating issues. So if that's not proof enough for you, I don't know what is. So a little bit of background, and now we're going to focus on our GS300. So the GS300, or I believe this is the L210 gearbox. This is the L210, this is the L110. I got them backwards in a previous video, apologies for that. Like the 450, this has the two motors, MG2 in the rear casing, MG1 in the front. And we can use both MG2 and MG1 to provide power to the prop shaft flange simply by locking the input shaft, which would have traditionally been connected to the internal combustion engine, just as we do with our 450. Now, the design of the 300 makes our lives a lot simpler. The 450 has an electric oil pump, and you need the oil pump controller and so forth to run the oil system, because this has a 2-speed hydraulic planetary gearbox at the back of it, a high and a low speed. So it needs pressurized transmission fluid in order to shift the clutch packs in there. Now the GS300 does not have that. It has just a single reduction gear that comes from MG2 to the prop shaft flange. And when we lock MG1, we get an additional gear reduction from MG1 all the way through out to the flange. So what they did in here then in terms of oil pumping was extremely clever. Whereas on the 450, when you lock the input shaft, the internal mechanical oil pump is not able to rotate to create oil pressure. Hence the need for the electric system, the external electric oil pump on the 450. Now what they did in here was they came up with this clever little two-way clutching system for the mechanical oil pump, so that the mechanical oil pump in here can be driven either by the rotation of the input shaft or by the rotation of the prop shaft flange. So in our case, when we lock the input shaft here, the oil pump will still run when we rotate the output shaft flange, either by the action of MG2, MG1, or both together. Now if you look around the floor here, you will see the remains of an oil stain where I proved that very point when I first managed to get this gearbox to work, because I didn't have this little loopholes here connected to these pipes, and this is where the oil cooler would have been connected. So it basically, as soon as the motor started turning and the prop shaft flange started turning, it started running the oil pump, and it just started pumping oil out here onto the floor. And you might reasonably say, well, why didn't I just turn off the power? Well, I didn't want to do that because I didn't know what I had actually done to make the thing work. So I had to take a few readings and shoot a little video clip, which I'll put in here for you so you can see the mess that I made. But fortunately, we now have a piece of hose linking to the oil cooler, so we can run now. I've refilled oil and we can run now without any oil leaks. So that's one very big difference between our L210 GS300 and our L110 GS450. There's none of the complexity of the external electric oil pump with this gearbox. This gearbox is also, I believe, somewhat lighter and somewhat smaller than the 450. So that makes it appealing as well. Another thing that we like to have here for our rear wheel drive systems is there's a standard kind of a shift lever here, as you'd see on a normal automatic, and there's a little switch where it'll basically tell us what gear that we're in. But the most important one is if we go all the way back, we engage a park lock. So we have a park lock facility here when we put the transmission into park, as you would have on a normal hydraulic planetary gearbox. These other positions here, so you'd have P, R, N, D, they don't really do anything internally in the gearbox other than just release the park lock, but would be quite handy to connect to this. So that we could then have that information fed to our VCU, say, so that it knows when we're in park, reverse, neutral, or drive. So this is our GS300 gearbox. I will take the camera off the tripod there. I'll give you a little bit of a walkthrough here. We will show you some of the electrical connections on here. It's quite simple. It's quite simplified compared to the 450. That's why I really do like this Toyota hybrid stuff, not just for the simplicity, but for the fact that it's so commonly available, and also has quite a few million miles on it, probably at the very least. Another aspect about this is that you can get parts for them. Like I was able to go to a Toyota dealer in my town here and get an electrical connector and so forth for the inverter without any issues at all. So let's go, let you have a look around here, and yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, so I do a little walk around here of our GS300 gearbox. We've got our prop shaft flange, which is actually a different size to the one on the 450, unfortunately. Here we have our shifter, our oil cooler pipes that I just have linked out at the minute, but we would fit a oil cooler when we're putting this in a vehicle. Here at the front, at the bell housing, we have for it fairly traditional splined input shaft that I've just got a vice grips and a cable tie, doing a very crude job of locking that from rotating at the minute, just so I can run some tests here. Coming over the top, we have our MG2 and MG1 high voltage connections. And in here, let's get you in here at the side, try and get you a better view of this. We have our MG1 and MG2 resolver and temperature sensor connections. And that is all the wiring that we need to this particular gearbox. Here on the bench, we have our inverter converter assembly where we have our MG1, MG2, high voltage connections go in there. Here on the side, we've taken out a little plug here to allow us to connect our negative and positive high voltage DC connections, where this is just a power supply at the minute that I'm using for bench testing. Here on the left then, we have our multi-pin connector. As I say, you can actually buy this one. You can actually buy this connector from Toyota, unlike the one for the GS450 that you have to get from a scrap car, because they will not sell it to you. But they will indeed sell the connector here for the 300, no problem. And the things that we need to make this whole thing run reasonably straightforward. We have our two resolver wires here that connect to the two plugs on the gearbox. So we have our MG2, they're flagged with some red tape, MG1. So there's 6 wires in each of these that connect in here. We need a 12 volts red and a ground white, and we need 4 communication wires here. There's 4 2-pair wires here that we connect to our VCU that provide the inverter with our synchronous serial communication that we need to convince it that it's still in a Lexus and wants to go driving for us. So we'll show you that shortly. One thing I should point out at this point, and it is super important, is that both with the GS300 inverter and the GS450 inverter is that we must not connect our high voltage DC to the OEM port. So there's a port here on the side where the normal high voltage battery in the GS300 would connect, and it's over here. I'll just move this. It's over here on the GS450. We must not use those. We must bypass the boost converter stage in here and connect our high voltage directly into the main capacitor bus bars in the inverter using, you know, some kind of brass post or something like this. So here you'll see with these 2 posts on our GS300, and there's a connection there on the similar situation here on the GS450. So this is it. Inverter. This also has a DC to DC converter in there that we should be able to use. So I'll be doing some investigation on that. So this is our inverter. Gearbox. Got our 2 resolver connections. Come back here. Got a 12 volts and our ground. We've got some communications, and that's it. We don't need anything else to make this thing spin. So about time I prove that to you. So welcome to the mess job. So please forgive the wiring mess here. It is necessary at the minute for me, because not only am I developing the software we'll need to run the GS300, but I am debugging VCU software for the GS450. So I've got a whole bunch of different wiring and power supplies and stuff going on here. So don't be intimidated by this. It's really quite straightforward. So the 4 wires we showed you over here, just to recap. Those are our 4 color-coded communication cables from our inverter. Come over here. We pick them up again here, just with some color coding on them, and they connect to our VCU. And that's the only communication that we need, are those 4 wires there between our VCU and our inverter to command it to run. Now, little mess job that I have here is just to allow me to adapt between the Zombieverter VCU here and the older design Lexus GS450 as it was only. Now it's both the Lexus GS450 and the Lexus GS300 VCU. So I'm using just a little made up wiring adapter harness here to allow me to change around between them. It's a lot easier to develop code and run tests with this simpler VCU, at least for me with my super limited software skills, than on the more powerful Zombieverter VCU. But now that we have things working with our Lexus VCU, I will be porting the code developments that I've made for this over to our Zombieverter VCU. And we will then be also simultaneously then connecting back up to our GS450 and debugging the problems that we have with this with our new firmware. And then we'll have the ability to run the GS300 and the GS450, both from our Zombieverter VCU here and our older design, let's call it the Lexus VCU at this stage. And it'll be a lot more, like, you know, this can run a lot more systems than just these two, but this is what we're working on here at the minute. So, done enough talking, Damien. Isn't it time we fire this sucker up? And indeed it is. So I got 2 power supplies here. This is just a cheap little 60 volt 5 amp power supply to provide my HV to the inverter, and this one just provides 12 volts DC. So yes, I will turn that on and it won't work because one of these wires has fallen out. So let's see if we can fix that. Nothing like fixing it on camera. Yay, there we go. So this is just providing 12 volts DC to our VCU. See, we've got a nice red flashing light here. There it goes. And our inverter over here. So now we will turn on our high voltage, and we've got our forward wire to our VCU here. These 2 little orange wires, just tell it which direction to go. Pull either one to 12 volts, it'll go forward, it'll go reverse. At the minute we're in forward, so let's give it a squeeze of the throttle here. And there we are. Spinning away. And so if we want to go in reverse, as we might frequently want to do, try and do this single-handed, we're going to remove the crocodile clip from this wire. Try and bring it up here. Yeah, nothing like quality camera work for me. We should now be in reverse, so our output flange should go the opposite way. There we go. We're in reverse. And that's it, folks. We do have some more information from the Toyota data to decode. It's been about, I've been on this now for maybe a week and a half, maybe even 2 weeks. But we've got most of our messages working here. There's a few relating to things like inverter temperature and things like that that I have to sort out. So folks, there it is. Our, at least for me anyway, a quick walkthrough of our GS300 system, and we now have running here on the bench. So as I said, next move will be finalizing the software for the, let's call it the Lexus specific VCU, and by the time you see this video that should be done, and there'll be a link in the description to the GitHub repo for that. Also then we will be porting that code over to the Zombieverter VCU and then fixing the problems that seem to have plagued the GS450 module in that firmware. So our next semi-exciting episode, we should have these two working interchangeably with the Zombieverter VCU and be able to demonstrate that to you. Also, for the Zombieverter VCU, or sorry, for the Lexus GS450, and I might even do the two of them in the one, do the two Lexus inverters and gearboxes in the two. I'll go through a painstaking wiring setup for these so that you will be put firmly asleep and not have to worry about insomnia ever again. So, until that time, folks, don't forget to dislike, thumbs down, do not share, do not subscribe. If you are subscribed, click the unsubscribe button here and turn off notifications so that you don't get subjected to this kind of nonsense ever again. Also, don't check the links in the description for Open Inverter Forum and GitHub, Patreon, PayPal and things like that, because if you financially support me on any of those platforms, I'm just going to do more of this kind of thing, and nobody wants that. So, I think that's about it. Hopefully, anyone that was suffering from insomnia is now sleeping soundly. And until next time, happy GS300 spinning.